from sea to shining sea.
I'd like to welcome you to the 2019 Minnesotans Military Appreciation Fund Dinner. My name is Tom Hauser, Chief Political Reporter for 5 Eyewitness News. I will be your MC this evening, as I have been for a number of years. Roger and I were just talking. Neither one of us remembers how many years, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but you're stuck with me regardless. Before we get any further, let's please give a round of applause to VocalEssence and their terrific version of America the Beautiful. This critically acclaimed professional chorus was formed in 1991 and is directed by the inimitable Philip Brunel. Philip Brunel, round of applause for Philip. Thrilled to have him here tonight. And again, as I mentioned, over the past several years, I've had the privilege of serving as the MC for this annual event. I know some years we've been at different venues. This one is interesting for me because exactly 40 years ago, last week, I was here for my high school prom. There will be no further information divulged at this time. But it is great to be back and helping MMAF support Minnesota veterans and their families. Tonight, we're going to hear from 2 powerful speakers who will share their insight and experiences about serving and sacrificing for our country. And as I have shared with many of you who've been to these dinners in the past, my family has had its share of sacrifices in military service. My Uncle Rod, who, if he were still with us today, would be my youngest uncle. He was my mother's youngest brother. Rod McGinnis was a naval aviator, and early in the Vietnam War, his plane went down over the South China Sea, and they never found his body. In fact, they found only a couple of pieces of his airplane. And that, of course, was the ultimate sacrifice in my family. Then there was my uncle Len Guerin, who was a bomber pilot during the Vietnam War. And he survived the war, many combat missions in the war, but he lost a battle against cancer that was caused by Agent Orange poisoning from carrying that chemical on his planes from time to time. So he also, years later, paid the ultimate sacrifice. Then my dad also served in the Air Force, and he was one of the lucky ones who came home and then served out a wonderful medical career here in the Twin Cities. And so, like the members of my family who have felt the call to serve, many others, many of you who are here tonight, have shouldered the burden of protecting our nation and worked to extend the freedoms that we enjoy as Americans to other people around the globe. We're here tonight to honor these brave service members and, just as importantly, their families. They all deserve recognition, the utmost respect, and a sincere thank you. Many are still serving and may be deployed again in the near term. As you know, in the military, you just never know when you're going to get the call. It takes a community effort to fully support military members, veterans, and their families in this increasingly divisive and complicated world. But by joining together, we can accomplish many great things. That's why your decision to be here tonight is so important. Together, we can say thanks to those who have served and those who are serving and keep this statewide effort strong and vital. We can let our military members and veterans know we are deeply grateful for their many and continuing sacrifices. I'd like to welcome our special guests who will share their stories tonight. They are recently retired U.S. Army General Joseph Votel and let's have a round of applause for General Votel. As well as Dianna Beardsley, and she has a very unique and touching story to tell, and we look forward to hearing from Dianna Beardsley. And we also want to welcome the family and friends that have come tonight to support these 2 heroes. Let's have a round of applause for them as well. We look forward to hearing their insights and experiences, and I'm sure they will inspire all of us tonight and also remind us why we need to be so thankful. Now, I would ask you to please rise as the Honor Guard, made up of members of the Fort Snelling Memorial Rifle Squad, present our colors. The Memorial Rifle Squad was the first all-volunteer honor guard in the country to conduct services at a national cemetery. Since June of 1979, that is 40 years, they have performed roughly 80,000 honor services for departed veterans, never missing a single day in all that time. And the Postal Service thinks they're good. They've got nothing on these guys. Please remain standing after the colors for the performance of the Star-Spangled Banner.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. Let's have a round of applause for that wonderful rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. Now up next, we have a special guest, and I'm especially glad that he's here tonight because it means I'm not missing anything at the state capitol right now. Our Commander-in-Chief of the Minnesota National Guard and our Governor, Tim Walz. The governor himself served 24 years in the Army National Guard, retiring in 2005 from the 125th Field Artillery as a Command Sergeant Major. Yes, our governor was a Red Bull. While in Congress, he served on the House Committee on Veterans Affairs and helped pass the GI Bill of 2008, which expanded educational benefits for veterans and their families. And he also helped pass the Traumatic Brain Injuries Center Act, which improved care for veterans with major head injuries. It is my pleasure now to welcome a true supporter of our military personnel, the Governor of Minnesota, the Honorable Tim Walz.
Good evening, and Tom, thank you. Thank you for your family's sacrifices, and thank you for your long support of our military families and our veterans. Chairman Sitt, thank you, and to your family for choosing to serve others, choosing to rise up and making sure that every one of our families was honored, and for that we are grateful. General Votel, Ms. Votel, thank you for a lifetime of service to this nation. It was a pleasure to watch your career, sir, and to see you overseas a few times and know that the troops under your command were the best led in the military. Thank you, sir. General Nash is here tonight, a former Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard that I had the distinct privilege of serving under his command, and I want to thank you, General Nash. Thank you. Ambassador Kaplan and Sylvia, thank you for your service to this nation. We are grateful, and thank you for choosing to be part of this organization. The beautiful tribute to our nation by VocalEssence, we thank you, and a special thank you to Dianna Beardsley, you're going to hear from in a little while. Dianna occupies the most sacred place in this nation's society, and that is a Gold Star mother, a mother whose ultimate sacrifice allowed us to live in the freedom and peace in the most open and most prosperous nation on earth. And that came from the sacrifices, and you will hear, no mother should ever lose a son, but when a mother loses a son or a daughter in service to this nation, they occupy that place of sacredness, and every single one of us owes a debt of gratitude that cannot be repaid. So, Dianna, thank you. To each of you, thank you. There's many places you could have been tonight with your time and your talents. There's many things you could have done with your resources, but you chose to be here. And you chose to be for a very, very simple reason. You love this nation, and you also understand that the incredible privileges that we live under, literally billions of people around the world, cannot imagine the freedoms that we have to choose the lives that we led. And you also understand that those things did not come easy and they did not come free. That those who wore the uniform and those families that supported those warriors paid, in many cases, and in case of Dianna's case, the ultimate sacrifice. And by being here, you do the one thing that can honor that sacrifice. You give back to this nation, you give back to those families, and we live our lives by you being here with the same sense of selfless service that they lived by. The sense that you are here and the dignity they live their lives by, that's how we must live ours. And I will tell you this, that Tom is right, I took a little break and he asked, but we are still in a cone of silence. My only words to him is that for the Air Force folks here, I am going to land this plane by Monday, one way or another. So I don't know how many engines will be left on it, but it will land. But I can tell you this, and I think this is one of the things. The frustrations that we often feel, the sense of wonder if our institutions are still there. We pit neighbor against neighbor. You used to be able to have Thanksgiving dinner with your uncle. Anymore, the politics makes that difficult. And it starts to fray at us. But I don't forget for a minute, and I can tell you this, the folks I'm working with, whether they be Democrats and Republicans in the House or the Senate, understand that the privilege we were given to self-govern requires us to treat ourselves and conduct our business with the same dignity as those soldiers that gave their lives to make sure that we could self-govern. So, on behalf of those folks up at the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate, I can tell you with absolute certainty, they are treating their responsibilities with dignity. They're doing it with an openness and a commitment to our democracy, and they are expressing their passions with a respectfulness to what makes us strong is our differences of opinions are one thing, but the common values that we hold true together, and chief amongst those, the respect and the commitment that we make to our warriors and to their families is unwavering. So on behalf of 5.7 million Minnesotans, your choice to be here tonight is one that I say thank you with great gratitude. Thank you to those who wore the uniform, and a special thank you to those who occupy that special place who lost loved ones in defending this nation. So may God bless each of you, this great organization, and this great country. Thank you.
We call that in the biz a scoop, that this plane is going to land one way or another, even if there's flames coming out of every engine. We're going to get this baby on the ground. And we'd like to thank, I know he has left the building already, but let's have another round of applause for Governor Tim Walz taking time out of his busy schedule to be here tonight. Now, for our invocation and to describe the significance of the missing soldier table tonight, please welcome Air Force Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Pulju. Lieutenant Colonel Pulju commissioned into the Army National Guard in 1999, transferred to the Air National Guard in 2007, and has deployed 3 times in his 20 years of service. He is currently the Wing Chaplain for the 133rd Airlift Wing and the Joint Forces Headquarters Full-Time Support Chaplain. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Pulju.
As we think about those far away, we remember those who did not make it home. Our fallen cannot be forgotten, and there are also the prisoners of war and the missing in action. Please direct your attention to our empty table that represents the missing soldiers. Each item on that table is significant. The single red rose reminds us of the families who keep safe, waiting for their return. The candle that's lit represents their unconquerable spirit. The slice of lemon on the plate represents their bitter fate. And the glass inverted represents that they are not here to toast with us tonight. I invite you to pray with me. Gracious and holy Lord of nations and armies, of nature and history, of flesh and soul, God of the joyful and God who is close to the brokenhearted, we come to you as grateful people tonight, as those who have received the service and sacrifice of so many on our behalf. Your scriptures underscore the goodness of selfless, sacrificial service as central to your very own character, and it is a trait you call us to replicate in our lives. As grateful receivers, we respond with a desire to extend and multiply the blessings that we've received, to say thank you, to return service, and to celebrate generous accomplishments in these endeavors. So we invite you into our midst tonight. Bless us that we may enjoy good conversation with good friends and good food, and that we might promote the purposes of good in this world. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you again for that invocation, Chaplain Pulju. Now, as we continue with our program, feel free to begin enjoying your salad, although I can tell many of you already have. But it's always nice to ultimately get permission, right? It's like when you're a kid, you know, you ask your mom if you can have that Twinkie after you've eaten them all. Now, I want you to consider what some of our service members may be having for their dinner tonight. And I want you to check out the brown packages that are on each of your tables tonight. They are known as MREs, but when I was in Bosnia a number of years ago with Governor Pulju, I'll never forget, what one member of the National Guard told me. They're actually called MPMREs, which means meals pretty much ready to eat, not 100%. The MRE is a totally self-contained packet consisting of a meal packed in a flexible meal bag that is lightweight and fits easily into military field clothing pockets. Now, I hope you'll pass that around so everybody can get an idea of what the men and women of the military might be having for dinner themselves tonight. So up next, our next song from VocalEssence is the Armed Forces Medley. We ask that all members of the military please stand as your branch is recognized in the song.
Over hill, over dale, we will hit the dusty trail, and the caissons go rolling along. In and out, hear them shout, counter march and right about, and the caissons go rolling along. Then it's high, high, he in the field of artillery. Shout out your numbers loud and strong. For wherever you go, you will always know that the caissons go rolling along. From the walls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marines. Anchors away, farewell to college joys. We sail at break of day, 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 day. Through our last night on shore, bring to the floor, until we meet once more. Here's wishing you a happy voyage home. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in thee. Through surf and storm and rain, why shall our purpose be? Semper Paratus is our guide, our fame and glory too. To fight, to save, to fight and die, by Coast Guard we are for you. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, where we fly into the sun. Here they come, sweet Pulju, and boys, give it the down the drive, scouting your fame from under, off on one terrible course. We live in fame or go down in flame, ain't nothing to stop the U.S. Air Force. America!
I would like to introduce Roger Sitt, who is chair of MMAF and CEO of Sitt Investment Associates. Please, if I can have your attention. Roger Sitt continues his father Gene Sitt's vision for MMAF, and I got to know that vision very well when Gene Sitt was on my At Issue program many years ago when he first started this endeavor, and it's so great to see it still going many years later. Prior to his career in investment management, Roger was a captain in the U.S. Air Force, serving 6 years active duty with financial management responsibilities at Headquarters Space Division. Roger graduated with military distinction from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1984, and I must tell you that 11 years before that, he played Little League Baseball with me here in Edina. So, kind of buried the most important part of his resume, but there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Roger Sitt.
Thank you, Tom. And just to go on record, Tom played Little League Baseball. I warmed the bench. Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all here this evening. Tonight, we honor military members for their commitment and sacrifices. We honor their families for their unending support and encouragement. And we thank all of them for their importance to our nation and the sacrifices they have made. Tonight, we also extend our gratitude to everyone who has donated in the past, as well as those who are donating this evening. I want to note that we continue with a solid track record of giving more than 90 cents of every dollar raised directly to our service members and their families. Our mission is simple. We thank Minnesota service members. We do so by awarding cash grants to Minnesota service members who have served honorably in combat since the tragic day of September 11th, 2001. There are no conditions, I emphasize no conditions, on how the grant is to be spent. I'm pleased to report that thanks to your generous contributions, MMAF has awarded more than 17,400 grants totaling more than $11.3 million to Minnesota service members since 2005. So I think everyone should give themselves a big hand. The composition of the grants are as follows. $500 grants have been awarded to 16,800 Minnesota service members who have served honorably in combat zone without injury. $2,000 grants have been awarded to 498 Minnesota Purple Heart recipients, and 251 of those Purple Heart recipients received a second grant up to $8,000 based on the severity of their injuries. And then $5,000 grants have been awarded to 66 families of those Minnesota service members who were killed in action, one of which you will hear from later this evening. These grants are small relative to the commitment and sacrifice our service members and their families are making, but we want them to know we are thinking about them and we appreciate what they are doing for our country. And with that, they do for our country is faithfully serve without regard of politics. They are prepared to do whatever our country calls upon them to do when we celebrate their honor and commitment to our country. Thank you. In the age of instantly available news and battles for headlines, the sacrifices of our service members and their families tend to be overlooked. We will not overlook our service members. We will continue to bring attention to the facts, and the facts are eye-opening. As of March 2019, the Department of Defense indicates that there is over 21,000 Minnesotans serving in the armed forces. There are over 8,000 active duty and reservists serving in Minnesota, and another 13,000 soldiers and airmen serving in the Minnesota National Guard. In 2018, over 900 soldiers and more than 500 airmen from the Minnesota National Guard deployed in support of operations in the Middle East. Many of those soldiers and airmen are still deployed, returning home later this summer. And later this year, an additional 700 members of the Guard will deploy. Additionally, there are active duty and reservists currently deployed, but we do not know the exact numbers. Since 9/11, it is estimated that between 45,000 to 50,000 Minnesotans have served in a combat zone, many more than once. This includes National Guard, reserves, and regular active duty. MMAF has been proactive in working with Minnesota's county veteran services offices to reach out to our service members who are eligible for grants. We also contacted Purple Heart recipients who are eligible for additional MMAF grant funds to encourage them to reapply. Therefore, our mission continues. We support our Minnesota military members and their families. We owe a great debt to those who carry the burden for the rest of this country. We must uphold the honor these selfless men and women have provided. Please join me and raise your glass in a toast to all our Minnesota service members and their families. Hear, hear. Thank you for coming tonight and for your continued support, and please continue and enjoy the evening.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. Before we go any further, let's have a big round of applause for the waiters and waitresses and the people who prepared this wonderful meal. Thank you all for what you do. Next, I have the honor of introducing Dianna Beardsley, a Minnesota Gold Star mother whose son, Staff Sergeant William B.J. Beardsley, died when an IED detonated near his Humvee in Iraq in 2007. Dianna will recount the day she and her family received the news of her son's death and the journey they have been on since that day. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dianna Beardsley.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, thank you. And I know Governor Walz is no longer here, but I just want to thank him for his presence here tonight and the kind words that he had about our family. So thank you for that. Roger Sitt and Skip and everybody on the Minnesota Military Appreciation Fund Board, thank you for this honor to come and speak tonight. It's always a privilege to be asked to speak at events like this, and I will do my best to carry out your vision. And to all the service members in the room, thank you for your service to this great country. We are just so grateful for everything that you do. And General Nash, I didn't realize you were going to be here tonight. So thank you for being here. I appreciate that. I believe I had a chance to speak at an event with General Nash last year, a couple of years ago, so it was great to hear that you were here. And General Votel, thank you, sir, for your service as well. And I really look forward to hearing your speech, and I'm just really glad that I'm speaking before you, because I'm pretty sure no one should speak after a four-star general. So before I get started, I want to just take a quick second and introduce my very handsome husband, Jim, and I'm going to ask him to stand up. Because what you need to know is, even though I'm the one up here speaking, this is our story. This is our family's story. So, plus he offered to run up here and pick me up if I fall over from nervousness. So just want you to know what he looks like in case I go down, so you can get out of his way. So again, Jim and I want to thank you for this incredible opportunity to come and share our story with you and the impact your generosity has had on our family and so many others. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about our son, BJ. BJ was a pretty typical boy. He loved to hunt and fish and play in the dirt just like any young boy does. And as a young man, he loved to play softball, ride his motorcycle, which he had 2 of them. And most of all, I think he loved to spend time with his family. And of course, as any young person, he did struggle in this world, but generally loved life. And I think the smile he always had on his face showed that. BJ enlisted in the Army as an infantryman shortly after high school. He did his initial training at Fort Benning, Georgia, and upon completion, he was deployed to Korea. After returning from Korea, he was stationed with the 101st Airborne Division, the Air Assault Unit at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And this is where he met his wife, a fellow soldier, and they had their first child, our amazing grandson, Chance, both while they were actively serving. BJ and his wife decided to leave the military when they found out they were expecting their second child, our beautiful granddaughter, Alexis. And they moved back to Minnesota and worked for our family business for a couple of years. And I tell you, life was good. Our family was all together. We worked together. We played together. We basically did everything together, and life was very good. BJ decided to re-enlist in the Army and was told that he'd be doing a deployment in Iraq upon re-enlistment. And really, this is one of the reasons he wanted to re-enlist. He really wanted to acquire that combat patch. And he also loved the structure of the military. He would often say things like, at least he knew whose boots he had to shine, but he also knew whose boots he could spit on. So, in November of 2006, he was assigned to the 260th Quartermaster Battalion out of Fort Stewart, Georgia. And after his training there, he was deployed to Iraq. And on February 26, 2007, as BJ was riding in the lead Humvee of a convoy bringing supplies from Dianna to Baghdad, their vehicle struck 2 roadside bombs, and our son, Staff Sergeant William Joseph Beardsley, was killed instantly. And he is now laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery, a hero buried amongst heroes. Now that day changed our life forever, the very fabric of our family. And while as tragic as this was to our family, we felt we had a very distinct choice to make as to how we would carry on while forever missing our son and keeping his memory alive. We could either let this tragedy destroy us, and let me tell you, it'd be really easy to do. We believe it would be exactly what the enemy, both of this world and of our souls, would want. Or we could choose to walk in the promises of God, which there are many, like the promise that he works all things together for our good and his glory. And just so there's no mistake, the tragedy of losing our son is not from the hand of God. It is a result of pure evil in this world. It is the evil that our son was fighting against. Our son was and always will be an American hero, one who lived up to his nickname of Superman as he died fighting this evil. So what did we do? Well, thankfully, we chose to honor our son by trusting that God would use not just his life, but his death to bring hope and healing to our family as well as others. And we began to see many blessings as we looked for them in the depth of our grief. For example, when we were in Arlington, Virginia to lay our son to rest on May 23rd, 2007, which was BJ's 26th birthday, we found ourselves in the Oval Office with President George W. Bush. And now the story of how we got there, I think, is pretty amazing. Unfortunately, I can't tell the whole story. It's a little too long for tonight. But I can tell you, as we spent time crying with the president, praying with him, encouraging him, and being encouraged by him, we were blessed. We were blessed to know how deeply he cared about our loss and that he took the time to tell us this. And while the weight on his shoulders must have been huge, we were able to tell him that our son died for this United States of America, a country that is defending the defenseless, and that the president should be proud that he was the commander-in-chief of the good guys. Well, we must have made a good impression on him because when he was in town a few years ago, he invited us down for a visit, where again we were able to encourage him and be encouraged by him. And as we stood in his private suite, our son-in-law, Jamie, sang Amazing Grace for the president as he stood crying and holding our hands, a moment we'll never forget, a true blessing in our grief. Now, so many amazing people and organizations came into our life to speak blessings into our grief, allowing us again to have a platform to talk about our son and to honor his sacrifice. Organizations that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, like the Patriot Guard, who stood that silent flag line to honor our son and our family at his funeral. And the Patriot Ride, which Jim and I have the blessing, the honor of sitting on the planning committee for this event. It is an event which was created by the Dennis Kirk Corporation as a way to get the community involved in letting our military and first responders and their families know that they are valued, and we as a community thank them for their ongoing commitment to defend our country. MMAF is also a recipient of some of the funds that we raise at this event, and last year we were able to give them a check for $28,500. Yeah, incredible. And the tribute to the Troops organization, whose months after our son's death came and stood in our front yard with 100+ patriots to tell us that they promised to never forget our son and the sacrifice our family has made. And they have upheld that promise even 12 years after our son was killed, as some of them have become like family to us. And Jim and I are also blessed to be a part of the board of directors of this organization as well, and what a blessing that has been to us over the years. Now, this one's a little more personal, but as a full-time realtor, and I'm not plugging anything, but as a full-time realtor, the company I work for, TCI Realty of Minnesota, which happens to be owned by our daughter and son-in-law, started a program called MPF Heroes, which allows us to give back a portion of our commissions to those who have served, just as a thank you, a total give-back program to honor the memory of our son and continue to tell others about him and to show our appreciation to those who have served this great country. And of course, the reason we are here tonight, the Minnesota Military Appreciation Fund organization. And if I had to bet, I'm sure most of you are not here by accident. You came to this dinner to support the MMAF because you wanted to be a part of something bigger than yourselves. I'm sure you will hear this information repeated several times tonight, but I think it's worth repeating. MMAF has provided more than $11.3 million in grants to over 17,300 Minnesota service members. That's just incredible. Their generosity, your generosity, through that, you have helped families like ours to keep our loved ones' memories alive and to speak hope and healing into the lives of those who have served this great country. And as a recipient of one of your awards last year, our family is very grateful for the monetary gift you gave us in honor of our son's sacrifice. But can I tell you, there is so much more behind the check that we received. You did not just give our family money. You spoke into our lives and gave us, and more importantly, our son BJ, a place of value and honor for how he died while serving this country. And did you know there is actually a physical benefit when you help others, either through the donation of your time or money? Researchers have found that people who gave of their time and resources to help others through community and organizational involvement had greater self-esteem, less depression, and lower stress levels than those who didn't. So I'm thinking every one of you in this room right now should be feeling pretty good. Our family is still amazed at the blessings we have and continue to receive, and we know we cannot undo the tragedy of losing our son, and he will forever be in our hearts and stories. I know that if BJ were here tonight, he would feel right at home. He would say he was amongst his kind of people. We are so glad we made the right choice that fateful day, so we can continue to be a voice for our son and bring hope to others. While we have lost so much, we have also been given so much too, blessings upon blessings. And we will be forever grateful for those that God has brought into our lives through the tragic loss of our son. It is our hope that we can continue to pay that forward while forever keeping our son's memory alive. Many people ask us where our strength comes from, and what we want you to remember is not that we are strong, but to remember where our strength comes from. And for us, that's the Lord. Let me close with this. When we received our son's belongings after he was killed, he had this verse written on the inside cover of the field journal he kept with him daily. John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, that he would lay down his life for one's friends. So, in honor of our son's sacrifice, I want to encourage each one of you to look for those blessings that God has surrounded you with, even in the midst of your struggles, and look for ways that you can bless others. God bless each one of you for your generous hearts And of course, may God continue to bless America.
I am always amazed by people like Dianna and her husband and family. Thank you, Dianna, for sharing that courageous story. We will never, any of us, forget the sacrifice made by your family and by BJ in his efforts to fight for our country. It always amazes me how much positivity people like Dianna and her family can channel out of tragedy. It is really, I think, a lesson for all of us. So thank you again. Another round of applause for the Beardsley family. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, a man I had the honor of interviewing a few weeks ago, just after he had retired. General Joseph Votel retired at the end of March as a 4-star Army general and commander of United States Central Command, better known as CENTCOM, responsible for our nation's security interests across some of the most volatile regions in the world, including Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq. You know the places from your newscasts you watch every single night. This is the man who was in charge of our military operations in those areas. When I interviewed him a few weeks ago, I asked him, do you feel like the weight of the world has been literally lifted from your shoulders? And he said, a little bit, but I just can't imagine how you go from that to not doing that. It is just, it's mind-boggling, the responsibility that this man had. And we are so glad that General Votel has returned home to Minnesota after nearly 40 years serving in the highest and most sensitive assignments our country can assign. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Joseph Votel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Tom, thanks very much for that very gracious introduction. Thank you very much. Roger Sitt, the chairman and prime sponsor for tonight's event, thanks very much for hosting us all this evening and certainly for carrying on with your father's legacy here. What a tribute to him that you all continue with this. To Skip Krosick and Joe Bennick, who have been the project directors and who have been in constant communication with me for a number of months, getting me set up here. Thanks very much. Joe, I hope that you will continue to send me emails on a regular basis so we can stay in contact here. So I also want to recognize Ms. Hannah Baumann. She has been in charge of the publicity and the public affairs aspect of this and helped hook me up with some of our local media here to talk with them and tell them a little bit about what this event is. I know the governor has departed. I just want to highlight for you and for the state of Minnesota how cool it must be to have a governor who is a command sergeant major. Now, this is really significant. You know, in the military, it is the officers that come up with the really great ideas and the big plans, but it's the non-commissioned officers, led by the sergeant majors, that actually get it done. And I think it's pretty cool that the state of Minnesota has a command sergeant major as its governor, and we wish him the very best as he continues to move forward. Unfortunately, the Kaplans have departed. Ambassador Sam Kaplan, his wife Sylvia, great people, our former ambassador to Morocco. I had the opportunity when I passed through Morocco several years ago to have dinner with the Kaplans, and we had a wonderful evening together. And it was great to see them. Major General Rick Nash and his wife Jeanette, everyone knows Rick Nash and what he means to the state, certainly as our most recent adjutant general, and prior to that, the commanding general of the 34th Infantry Division and a habitual deployer here on behalf of our country. Rick, thanks very much for your great service, not only to our country, but especially to our state. Yes, absolutely. BJ's mom, Dianna, thank you very much for those great words. Absolutely inspiring. I feel in awe that I am following you. I do know there is at least one other Gold Star family mom here tonight, Jill Stevenson. Jill's out here in the audience. She is the mother of Ranger Ben Kopp, who was killed in action in Afghanistan. And I had there you are, Jill, great to see you. I had the very high honor of presiding at her son Ben's memorial here in Minnesota, and then at his burial in Arlington. And you know, at a time when you think that you are there to help provide strength to others, you begin to understand that it is actually the families that are comforting you. So, Jill, it's great to see you. Thanks very much for your sacrifice as well. Of course, the Honor Guard from Fort Snelling and VocalEssence for their very great musical renditions this evening. Thank you very much. Chaplain, thanks for your great words as well. And I know we've got a number of fellow service members, veterans, and family members and supporters of the Minnesota Military Appreciation Fund. Thank you all for being here this evening. It's a real honor for me. I do want to just recognize also, I have some family members here. Two of my 5 brothers are here, Dick and Mark, and their wives, Susan and Betty Jo, and 2 of my 3 sisters are here, Ann and Maria. Thank you all for being here, along with my wife, my lovely wife, Michelle, who is here. So thanks for being here. I should also say that the young junior ROTC cadets that you're seeing out in the hallways are all from Harding High School on the east side of St. Paul. And big round of applause for them. They look fantastic. You know, I joined the military, and as I think back on my time, my military journey began with a very fortuitous visit to the U.S. Naval Academy back in 1968. My oldest brother Dick and his wife Susan lived down in Baltimore, and we visited them. It was right after the assassination of Martin Luther King, and there were curfews in place, but we could get out during the day and do things. And one of the things my brother Dick did was took my dad and mom and I out to the Naval Academy. And it only took for me a very short visit there to recognize that this is what I wanted to do. And while I did harbor desires of going to the Naval Academy, that was not in my future. I was able to get into West Point. I attended Cretin High School, and there was a member of the faculty there that was a graduate of West Point, and he talked to me about that. So I applied to both and got into one. I would never admit this, but actually West Point was my backup school there. It seems to have worked out pretty well. I managed to muddle through West Point and was commissioned as an infantry officer. And as you've heard, I did all the normal things that infantry officers did. I married my high school sweetheart, Michelle, who comes from Johnson High School on the east side of St. Paul. I like to say I rescued Michelle from the east side, but she always comes back on that. But I highlight that because she has been there every step of the way with me from the whole experience, and I would not want to. I would do everything all again with her. It's been a great experience. I joined the Army in 1980, and this was not long after the Vietnam period, and this was not a particularly good time for the military, but it was on the cusp of the Reagan buildup, and so it was a very exciting time to be in the Army. Michelle and I first went to Germany, and then we continued on with a variety of assignments over the years. We went from Germany to Fort Benning, Georgia, to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, back to Hunter Army Airfield, Georgia, to Naples, Italy, to Fort Drum, New York, back to Hunter Army Airfield, Georgia, to Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania, back to Fort Benning, Georgia. By the way, if you're keeping count, that's 4 times in the state of Georgia. As Michelle used to say, join the Army, see Georgia. I had an opportunity to serve in the Pentagon, at the Fort Bragg, North Carolina, down to MacDill Air Force Base, back to Fort Bragg, back down to MacDill Air Force Base. All told, about 30 moves in 39 years. And all of that done by my wonderful wife here, helping us do that. I had the opportunity to serve during a variety of contingency operations, contingency combat operations in Panama and Bosnia and Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and a variety of other locations in the Middle East and Africa. And of course, we retired just a month or so ago back here to Minnesota, and we're very, very glad to go home. Now, our last assignment was down in Tampa, and I have to tell you, the people in Tampa were questioning my decision-making in terms of, they were telling me we were doing it the wrong way. But for us, this was about coming home. This was not always our plan, but it became our plan over the last several years, that this is where we are from, this is where our people are, and this is really where our heart is. And so it's great to be back in the state of Minnesota. I loved every day of being in uniform. The jobs were very demanding and oftentimes frustrating, but the people really made the difference. And it may have been my Minnesota roots or the fact that I grew up in a very large, vibrant family, but I've always liked the idea of service to our citizens and our nation. It was a noble profession, and I had the opportunity to serve at a time of great need when citizens across our country stood strong in supporting our service members. I was very proud to do my duty. Along the way, I had the opportunity to serve beside many fellow Minnesotans. People don't always think of Minnesota as a military state, but in many ways it actually is. Before I retired, 3 of our 10 combatant commanders, the 4-star officers who serve as the commanders of our troops around the globe and who answer directly to the Secretary of Defense and the President, grew up in Minnesota. That's pretty astounding. I ran into fellow Minnesotans serving in active duty units and National Guard units that were supporting us all the time. After talking about where we came from in the state, what high school we attended, our families, and how often we got back to Minnesota, the topic always drifted to the performance of the Minnesota Vikings. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. But every discussion we had always ended up with the unanimous conclusion that next year was definitely the year that we would win the Super Bowl. I've predicted that 39 times. A couple of years ago, Michelle and I had the opportunity to join Rick Nash and Dianna Beardsley and a large group of prominent Minnesotans on a rainy Saturday morning in front of the state capitol to open the Minnesota Military Family Memorial, the first of its kind in the United States. If you have not seen this memorial, I strongly recommend that you get over and view it very, very soon. Not only does it tie together the various monuments of the Capitol Mall, it is unique in its own right. Among its most prominent features is a gold star table with the names of our Minnesota fallen etched alongside a display of constellations leading to the North Star. Close by are 87 boulders representing our 87 Minnesota counties, and they are inscribed with excerpts of letters from loved ones to their soldiers or soldiers to their loved ones back home. It is quite poignant. And like the boulders themselves, it reminds us that our families are strong and resilient, and it makes it abundantly clear what we fight for: our country, our homes, and most importantly, our families. I have visited it more than a dozen times since the day it was dedicated. As I mentioned, I loved every day, every job I've had in the military. Along the way, I've had the opportunity to lead our most prepared and elite forces, conducting some of the most sensitive and secret operations our country has been involved in. I had the opportunity to lead a parachute assault into Afghanistan as part of the first contingent of soldiers to deploy immediately after 9/11. I've worked closely with our nation's best allies, and let me tell you that we are a lucky country to have such great partners and friends around the world. Without getting political, there is a unique bond between those who serve in uniform that transcends politics, regardless of where they are from. Both Michelle and I have enjoyed that aspect of our service. Our home is adorned with gifts and mementos from friends we have made and places we have visited around the world. I even had the opportunity to serve in the 5-sided puzzle palace known as the Pentagon. for a few years where I saw firsthand the interface between our military capabilities and our strategic policy objectives. I imagine it's a bit like watching sausage being made. It's necessary and important, if unpleasant, experience. Perhaps the most interesting job that I've had was the one from which I've just retired. That is the commander of U.S. Central Command, responsible for all of our military operations in the Middle East, the Levant, and Central and South Asia. This is an area that includes hotspots, as you've heard, like Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Iran, and Yemen. Altogether, an area of 20 countries extending from Egypt to Pakistan and Kazakhstan to Yemen, populated by nearly 550 million people, 50% of the world's proven reserves in gas and oil, 3 key maritime choke points, the Suez Canal, the Straits of Hormuz, and the Bab el-Mandeb, that on a daily basis carry 30 to 40% of the world's commerce. It is the crossroads of 3 great religions. There is poor governance, disenfranchisement of the populations, massive humanitarian issues, and endemic corruption. And it is home to a toxic sectarian narrative, prolific terrorist organizations, and weapons of mass destruction. But it is also an area that is rich in natural resources, in culture, in art, in education, in trade, in opportunity, and one of the fastest growing youth populations in the world. The Brookings Institute estimates that youth under the age of 24 make up 50 to 65% of the overall population of the Middle East. I'm often asked, why do we care about this area? It does not seem to have much for us. Haven't we been there long enough? These are very, very good questions. And my answer is always the same. The reason we care about this area is because our nation has enduring, vital interests there, and in order to safeguard those interests, we have to be engaged. I think there are 5 key interests that American citizens should understand about this area. First, we can never allow this area to be used as a platform to attack our country or our close friends and allies. This is the reason we went to Afghanistan after 9/11. The terrorist enemy we face in Afghanistan is not like conventional foes we have faced in other conflicts. This enemy is driven by long-standing underlying tensions that can only be addressed over a lengthy and sustained period of time. The cost for this has been astronomical. According to this week's figures, 1,898 Americans have been killed in action and over 20,000 have been wounded in Afghanistan. The solution is not just a military one, and that is why we are so strongly supporting the diplomatic efforts to bring about the reconciliation in Afghanistan and create conditions where they can address the threats themselves with our help at a reasonable and sustainable level. Secondly, instability begets instability, and we cannot allow instability in this area to spill over and impact our interests in other areas. Some of you will remember the early days of the current Syrian conflict, when a combination of ISIS brutality and the indiscriminate bombing of its population by the Assad regime and its Russian and Iranian supporters fueled an unprecedented exodus of refugees, impacting immigration policy and overwhelming other countries in the region and Europe, a true weaponization of people to achieve nefarious political ends. The population of Lebanon doubled with refugees. Jordan, a vital but very poor U.S. partner, absorbed just over 1 million refugees. The country of Turkey took in nearly 3 million refugees. And we all witnessed the heartbreaking images of families attempting to flee across treacherous waters to reach countries in Europe. It is in our interest to prevent this instability. Third, this is an area where there is the presence and the opportunity for further proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and we must prevent that from occurring. Just a couple of months ago, we saw a tense standoff between 2 nuclear-armed countries in Pakistan and India. Our political and military engagement and the fact that we had a level of trust and respect with both countries allowed us to play a key role in easing the tensions before it spiraled out of control. During my time in command, the President of the United States twice directed that we strike Syrian facilities to address their employment of chemical weapons against their own people. Imagine if an organization like ISIS, which readily adopted public beheadings as a way to punish their adversaries, got their hands on chemical capabilities. Can there be any doubt that they would employ it? Fourth, this is an area where on a daily basis 17 million barrels of crude oil and condensates pass through the Straits of Hormuz alone, nearly 20% of the daily global consumption. When combined with the other two key choke points in the region, the Suez Canal and the Bab el-Mandeb, which control the entry and exit points to the vitally important Red Sea, the area drives global trade and commerce to North America, Europe, and Asia. When Iran threatens to close the straits, for which they have the capability, it has to be taken seriously. It is true today that we as a country are not as dependent as we once were on Middle East oil and gas, but many of our most important allies remain so. And because of our interconnectedness, flow of commerce from and through this region remains vitally important. Our maritime presence and the strong relationships we maintain in the region help us safeguard this interest. And finally, it is in our interest to maintain a favorable balance of power in the region. The Middle East, the Levant, and Central and South Asia have been the scene of frequent diplomatic and military confrontations between great powers for a long time. The so-called Great Game between the British Empire and the Russian Empire of the late 1800s is an example. Our military support to the Afghan Mujahideen in the 1980s helped defeat the Soviet invasion and set conditions for us to prevail in the Cold War. The Great Silk Road that bisects Central Asia has long been an invitation for great power influence. Today, China is building their modern version of the Silk Road focused on achieving their economic interests. Russia is attempting to establish its influence in places like Syria, where they now have sustained access to warm water ports in the Mediterranean Sea and permanent air bases. When I was a teenager driving my mom's station wagon to Cretan High School events, we dealt with the oil crisis, and when we saw our own prices explode beyond what was normal. I was absolutely incensed the first time I had to pay $1 for a gallon of gas. Those seem like the good old days now. Franklin Roosevelt understood this well when he met with the first king of Saudi Arabia, King Abdul Aziz ibn Saud, aboard the USS Quincy in the Great Bitter Lake of Egypt on February 14, 1945, and he cemented a relationship and influence that helped our country and its allies for decades. A long-standing precept of U.S. policy has been that no single power could dominate Eurasia, of which the land mass and the waters of the area we are discussing comprise a significant portion. This is as true today as it was when it was conceived decades ago. Maintaining a favorable balance of power in this region remains in our vital national interests. Supporting these national interests from a military standpoint was both challenging and exhilarating, and I admit that I enjoyed being part of the day-to-day struggle that this effort entailed. It was not always fun, and certainly there were times of great despair, but I would not trade a single second of it. I don't expect that everyone here will agree with my thoughts or our policies, but as a former senior military officer, I believe it is my duty to try to explain this to you, at least from my perspective. I believe that ours is a system that benefits when people understand what and why we are doing certain things. As this dinner clearly illustrates, safeguarding our national interests takes a lot of resources: military hardware, money, policy and authorities, and most importantly, people. People like those this organization is attempting to support, young men and women from our communities who willingly step forward and, in the words of Isaiah, respond to the challenge of the day by saying, "Here I am, send me." For those of you who are serving or have served, thanks. We owe you a debt of gratitude. I thank the families of those who serve as well. In many ways, yours is the more difficult task, waiting, wondering, and praying for the safety of your loved ones. The 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, affirmed our government's obligation to care for those injured during war and to provide for the families of those who perished on the battlefield when he promised, and I quote, "to care for him who shall have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan." It is an obligation that we must take seriously. And this brings me to my last thank you of the evening, to those who have made this fund a reality for our Minnesota service members and veterans by organizing, contributing, and supporting our service members. Thanks to all of you for owning Lincoln's promise, and more importantly, for bringing it home to Minnesota. In essence, we are them and they are us. I'm proud of many things in my life, being a product of a large family, being a soldier, and serving at a time of great need for our nation, earning the love of a good woman, and together raising two great sons, and being a citizen of this great state. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you this evening and support this very worthy cause.
General, if I could ask you to just stay up here, and if I could ask Dianna to also join us up here, that'd be great. General and Dianna, thank you for your thoughts and insights, and especially thank you for your service and your sacrifices. Thank you very much. We'd like to award both of you a desk plaque from MMAF, and for all the great comments you've made and for your contribution here this evening. Dianna, to you, here's our thanks plaque.
Thank you.
In general. Thank you again.
Let's have another round of applause for Dianna and General Votel. The quality of the speakers at this event every year just never fails to amaze me. The experiences that we hear and about the people who deal with such tragedy. The one thing I just cannot get over, I mentioned about General Votel saying how he literally had the weight of the world on his shoulders for a time, yet he has no gray hair on his head. It just doesn't. I look at me and then I look at him. He's raiding Syria. Occasionally, I'm raiding the state capitol cafeteria. That's the most stress I had in my life, and I got more gray hair than he does. I'm going to ask your secret later, General. Well, our evening together is nearly done. I encourage everyone to share what you've heard here with your friends and family, and maybe we can get them here next year, and we'll take that wall down, and we'll have even more people here supporting this great event. And bring your friends and family to the MMAF's Thanks Minnesota Troops Block Party, which will take place on Saturday, September 21st, 2019 at the Hamel VFW. The event is a new and improved version of the MMAF's long-running annual Say Thanks Day. The event will include live music from the Emerson Avenue Band, food trucks, beverages, a 5K run, and a memorial walk. Additional information is available online at thankmntroops.org. Now, if you wish to support MMAF, consider making a donation tonight in the name of someone you know who has served. You may do so as you exit in the donation box at a table outside the ballroom. And I will remind you again that SIT Investment Associates has underwritten this entire event to ensure that every single dollar raised here tonight goes back to our military and their families. A round of applause to SIT Investment. It is a great tribute to the late Gene Sitt and his family that continues on his legacy, and I know all of us are so appreciative of that. By being here tonight, you have helped thank Minnesota troops to the tune of nearly $500,000 so far, so give yourselves a hand. And as you leave, please feel free to take home the beautiful flower centerpiece at your table. You can wrestle over it if you'd like. I know there's a number of, or each of you just take one flower. I don't care how you do it, just do it, people, all right? Now, if you would please stand as our honor guard retires the colors and remain standing for the final song, God Bless America.